evening. My friend, my friend who was like an aunt to me, she passed away today. Janie. And it's interesting that now, of course, I deeply love Janie, and I feel the pain occasionally, but all the brainwashing that I've been doing has allowed me to see a different state of existence, a real state of existence, and that everyone and everything will die or pass away, and to accept the impermanence, and that everything that I have and have ever experienced, and all of the friendships and love and connections I've made, I am just borrowing from the angel of death. I've cried like 5 tears. It's just interesting because when Lori called me, I cried like 3 tears, felt it for, 10 minutes, and then was able to accept it and tell myself it is what it is, and there's nothing I can do to change it. And so to linger in feelings of regret or wanting to do something different, or just mourning and feeling sad, it's fine to feel those things, but it doesn't change the fact that she passed away, and that she is no longer human. So, and it's an interesting thought that when I think of someone, say if I think of my parents, and they're in Ohio, and you can say I'm there with you in spirit, or like, oh, I feel your presence in my heart, that kind of thing. And you can to some extent, but I can't quite imagine that they're actually here with me, because I know that their physical bodies are in a different state. But with Janie, now that she is no longer confined to a physical body, it's interesting because I can imagine that she could be anywhere. And I guess that's the same with collective consciousness anyways. If spirits aren't necessarily confined to their bodies, but it's easier to envision it when the person has passed away, because that physical form that you know them as doesn't hold a spirit anymore. I love her a bunch. I really do. But it's interesting because you can say you miss somebody, but it doesn't change anything. It doesn't help anything. And the way I kind of view missing someone, saying I miss you, is that you're not in acceptance of the fact that of what is. So it's like saying I miss you is a really futile, trivial thing to say, because if you're saying I miss you to someone, kind of like how I was talking about, to say I want you to someone is then saying that you don't have them. But if you're saying I want you to someone, then aren't you saying it to them, and don't you have them in your life to some extent, in whatever regard that might be? So saying I miss you, if you're able to miss something and you're able to say I miss you, doesn't that mean you have it? Because if the people that I love that have passed away, if I can say I miss them, but I have an ability in my head to recollect who they are and know who they are, doesn't it mean they're still there? So, it's interesting, the stages of grief, because of course you fluctuate through them all, and they don't go in any chronological order. But I find that I am proud of myself to grasp a sense of acceptance in under 10 minutes of knowing that someone died. And it's interesting because sometimes I feel a sense of like guilt or shame towards myself. And I've felt this before when other people have died. Oh, I should be sadder. Oh, I should cry more. Oh, I should have this emotion. Oh, I don't want these people to think that I'm numb, or that I don't care, or that I'm not grieving. But it's interesting to embrace acceptance of someone passing away so quickly. is not really something that I feel that I've really had much capability of doing before. And of course, as you can see, I'm fluctuating. And of course, I deal with my own fluctuating anxieties and depression as well, which can play a contributing factor into my emotional fluctuations too. But all the brainwashing is working, and accepting death is working, accepting impermanence is working, and realizing that egos come into the world and they have their drama and then they disappear. And that's just how it is. And so to experience death over and over again, which ultimately anyone who lives long enough will, that I don't know what I was gonna say. But yeah, I've seen a lot of death, and as long as I continue to live, I will continue to see death. Or, if I don't live much longer, then I will experience my own death. If you experience your own death. Like, what point do you go from experiencing it to not experiencing it? Because if you die, then are you still experiencing it all the way through death? Or does your experience of it stop right before you die? I just know that I'm proud of myself to be willing to accept death. And of course, I am curious. And eventually I will be faced with death. The death of someone even closer than Janie. Say if my parents pass away, or my sister, or one of my best friends, or Brandon, or even my animal companions. Will my ability to handle death and their moving on, will I have improved in my ability to handle death? Am I capable of getting to a point where if anyone were to pass away, that I would be able to have the same amount of acceptance of them no longer being alive? I'm very curious of that. I'm sure it'll fuck me up, but I wonder if my recovery time would be quicker than it used to be in the past. But it doesn't matter. That's just all thoughts and hearsay, because the only moment that is ever going to exist is right now. And that being said, means that your moment that you're watching this video and hearing me say these words is the only moment that you will ever exist. And the only moment that you will ever experience is now. So, and then the next moment, something else will happen. But right now is when you're hearing these words. It's interesting for you, or for me speaking this, or for if I rewatch this. Death is interesting. Life is interesting. Before birth is interesting. Brandon said something a few days ago. When I first found out that Janie went into hospice. That, and if I didn't, I should probably call her. Because if anything were to happen, I would be sad that I didn't speak with her. Or that I would regret it. And that was really hard for me to hear. Because last time I called Janie when she wasn't doing very good. I think it was several months ago. Maybe in the summer. I don't know. Late summer. I don't know. When Lori called me and said she wasn't doing good or something. So I called Janie. And Janie said that, we talked for a little while. So she said, next time, text me first to see if I'm feeling like talking. Just because there's a lot going on and sometimes it's really stressful and I don't feel very good. I said, of course. And so, on Friday, when Lori texted me saying that Janie went to hospice, I did text her. And Lori had said that Aunt Marianne had talked to Janie a few days ago or something. And so I wanted to respect that. Because I know Janie's introverted. And she had previously told me to be sure to text before I call to see if she's up for talking. So I did. I didn't just outright call her. Because I wanted to honor that and respect that. And if that's how she feels when she's sick and doesn't feel good and it needs to take her time and only has energy for so much, I don't want to overwhelm her. So I didn't call. I was just waiting to see if she wanted to talk. But she didn't respond, which is fine. I imagine she must have been feeling really terrible these past several days. But there's no need for me to dwell on that, because whether I called her or not, it doesn't matter. Because that's not now. And the only one who would feel shame or regret, and that is me. And I don't need to feel that, because I didn't do anything wrong. So, clearly right now I'm having a little bit of trouble accepting that she isn't alive anymore. But I fluctuate, and all in all, I'm handling it pretty good. I imagine that handling a traumatic death experience again would still be quite stressful, because you're not only accepting what happened or that the person doesn't exist anymore, but you're also accepting the fact that you witnessed it and experienced it. And I've never experienced having PTSD from something necessarily, and allowing myself to feel so thoroughly. And if I can't stop thinking about the PTSD moments, allowing myself to think them, because that's just where my brain's at. But really, exposure therapy is what you need to do to get over PTSD triggering moments. I should probably listen to a lot of gurgling noises then. That's something I really haven't done, which would be quite scary. Because when Aunt Karen died, she died a really painful death. She was in a lot of pain, and she was groaning and grunting and screaming. And I experienced all that. And so certain kinds of noises that I heard her make are still hard for me now, and it's she died when I was 23, 6 years later. But that'd probably be a good thing for me to experience, because Brandon was doing sometimes he just makes silly noises, but sometimes the noises are deep gurgly noises, and
like groaning gurgle noises. Like he did that, I guess it was just last night. He did a noise like that, and I had a moment like, hang on. That noise made me sad. Hang on. So, gotta experience it. So, I'm glad that I can express to you my feelings and emotions and my acceptance, and talk about how I feel about death and grieving, and show and demonstrate how I'm proud of myself for being capable of accepting so soon. Still sad, yes, but I don't want to. And if I have to go through the denial stage, that's completely fine, or whatever sort of stage of grieving is completely fine, because all emotions are acceptable and valid. But right now, I am sad, but also I read this in, I guess, a book or like recently, is that I think it was the Power of Now book, that when you experience death, you can experience it as a sense of peace and calmness inside yourself. I'm gonna have to see if I can find where they. Hang on, let's see if I can find it. Because I just read it recently. Must have been at the end of. It's interesting that this sentence, and when you live in complete acceptance of what is, which is the only sane way to live, there is no good or bad in your life anymore. And I've been saying that for a little while, been thinking like that for a little while, that I think I even talked about this, that the ideas of good and bad are such interesting constructs that humans have made. Here. Here it is. When something dreadful happens to me or someone close to me, accident, illness, pain of some kind, or death, I can pretend that it isn't bad, but the fact remains that it is bad, so why deny it? That's a question from this book. And if any of you read The Power of Now, this is on page 148. So, Mary, page 148. Remember that we are not talking about happiness here. I just skipped a little bit. I'll just read these 2 paragraphs, okay? So I don't skip around. You are not pretending anything. You are allowing it to be as it is. That's all. This allowing to be takes you beyond the mind with its resistance patterns that create the positive and negative polarities. It is an essential aspect of forgiveness. Forgiveness of the present is even more important than forgiveness of the past. If you forgive every moment, allow it to be as it is, then there will be no accumulation of resentment that needs to be forgiven at some time later. So, I forgive myself for not calling Janie, because there's nothing I need to feel sadness or shame in not doing that, because that's what she asked me to do. I think something else I was going to add to my previous time when I was talking about that earlier is that if I were dying, and if I felt terrible and I felt sick, and that's what I asked of someone, I mean, how much energy do you really have to put out to talking to however many people? So I mean, everyone's gotta go about their being sick or their dying in the way that's comfortable for them, and I didn't want to interfere with her trying to be at peace or comfortable and acceptance. Whatever she was experiencing the last few days. So I didn't want to bombard her, because that's what she asked. And I didn't want to be selfish. Because if she really didn't want to take the energy to talk to me, that would be selfish for me to try and get. A last conversation with her? For what? For her to feel like she has to feel forced to talk to me, even though she feels like shit. But then again, of course, that's all assumptions. None of it matters anyways. It's just how I feel right now. None of it matters. Remember that we are not talking about happiness here. For example, when a loved one has just died, or you feel your own death approaching, you cannot be happy. It is impossible. But you can be at peace. There may be sadness and tears, but provided that you have relinquished resistance, underneath the sadness, you'll feel a deep sense of serenity, the stillness, a sacred presence. This is the emanation of being. This is inner peace, the good that has no opposite. I'm glad I was able to find that section of the book. I know I just recently read it, so I'm glad that I can find it. I don't resist it. And sure, there might be some turbulence, but there's also peace. So, this is the most tears that I've cried about it all day, and I don't think I've been suppressing my emotions at all. I've just been running through how I need, or how I want to observe reality in my brain. And when it comes to thinking about this and Janie's passing away. And I've been doing really good. I don't think I've been suppressing it or repressing it or whatever. I've just been doing really good at accepting it. And all I want to keep on saying is I miss her, I miss her, I miss her. But how can you miss someone who's still there? In here, and in here, and everywhere. I love Janie very much. Thank you for listening. To say like and subscribe would be superficial, because this blog, this topic, along with a few others that I've said, just doesn't seem necessary, because this is real, and this is important, and this is good shit that people need to hear and learn about. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me and my own journey and my continued mental health improvement while I continue to exist. I love you.